Welcome to the Suicide Prevention Show here on 1360 WLBK, a weekly show that tries to shed a little light on the darkness of suicide. With us, our usual cast of characters, Citizen Mike.
Great to be here, Terry.
Chuck Seabrass. Chuck.
Hey, it's always wonderful to be here.
And a very special thrill for all of us here, usually on the phone all the way from the great state of Michigan, Tamara Sutton. But Tamara, you're here live at the WLBK studios.
This is so exciting. I am not in my bathrobe, not with a cup of coffee, not pacing around my house while I talk to you. This
is that how
great.
we normally get you dressed like that?
Normally about how you get me.
But I'm still getting goosebumps.
You're still getting goosebumps. And of course, Tamara, it's funny. I found the original sheet when I first called you. It was in a book, a magazine about authors and books they've written, and it's dated December 2004 is when I first actually contacted you about the book that you wrote about losing your son Demetrius, and the book you wrote, Demetrius, My Gift of Life. I had the pleasure, you sent me a copy, I had the pleasure of reading it. Needless to say, a deeply moving book, but I thought since we have you here live today, we usually call our first segment Tamara's Highlights, but we thought we'd talk to you about writing the book and how difficult that must have been for you. If you could, and I know it's a painful thing to do, talk about, please, when you lost Demetrius, when that was, and when it came about that you said, you know what, I have to put this down and write a book about it.
That's a great question. I think that it probably came about because of the loss, because if you're going to do this, you have to express it somehow. You have to, and this is what I tell everyone, that you have to find your way, your method, whether it's through music or art or writing or working with children or volunteering or dancing or whatever it is, but you have to express it somehow. Chuck, do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely, I do agree.
It's so healing,
and you have to get it out.
It's compelling, actually. So that way, some people exercise, or start walking like crazy. Well, mine was I had 4 other children, all varying ages, from the age of 9 to 21, and they were all in completely and entirely different stages at every moment in time. Wow. And here I was with all of my grief and all that I was going through, and completely devastated, of course, and I had to be able to turn it off and focus on the kids wherever they were. And there were moments, it's in the book, actually, one of my favorite stories was I walked into Allie's room. She was 9 years old, and she was throwing a temper tantrum on the floor like a 2-year-old. And I walked over to her. I picked her up. I scooped her up, actually, into my lap, and I just held her. And a moment before walking down the hallway and finding her, had been sobbing uncontrollably in my bathroom. And then there we were, and she is in crisis, and I need to turn off what I'm doing and be there. So I sat down with her, I held her, and after she quieted down a bit, I said, Allie, what's going on? And she said, this shoelace is broken and it's in a knot and I can't get it out, and I hate this shoelace. Doesn't it know I need it to work? I can't get it to work. And I said, Allie, would this have been a problem before Demetrius died? And she melted in my arms and said, no, absolutely no.
Wow.
So I knew I was onto something, but I had to express myself. So what I did was I started writing like crazy. So when you read the book, the very first entry that you see is April 16th. It was written 45 minutes after Demetrius died.
Wow.
Not after he died, after they told me he had died. So my heart is racing like crazy. I can feel my umbilical cord being stretched to the max. I don't know where I'm going to go from here in life, and I've just lifted myself up from a crumpled mess on the floor, and I wrote a paragraph that just says, I don't know where I'm going to go from here, and I dread tomorrow when all of the answers are going to come. And I should have brought my book in with me so I could have read it to you, but in essence, though, to get that down in that moment in time was just the first step. And then there's a couple of other entries beyond that. They're all on the first page that are just screwy. They make no sense. I read them now and I think, whoa, she was really looking to find her footing somewhere, to find some way of getting a grip. And
But you picked up a pad and a pen and a paper
Yeah.
and you just wrote it down.
Yeah, and it was a week or so after the funeral that I actually started to tell my story. And I'm not sure why I needed to tell the story. And maybe I was thinking, the kids would want to hear this one day, or, I had to just put it out there. I had to start somewhere. So that's what I did. And it took
not to
8.5
interrupt you,
years.
I found it very interesting that you said you were actually in the bathroom crying. So in other words, you would hide away to express your grief,
Yeah.
and then have to be the strong mom when you came out of the bathroom and gather yourself up. And that's why I'm guessing that by writing, you were able to lose yourself in your thoughts as you wrote.
Yes, that's exactly what I did. And there were times when that's when I would let go. That's when I would just feel it and remember it and wish I had done something differently. And I would play back all the times that he said something to me and I missed it. When I know better and I didn't do better. So, and it locked it in for me so completely, because now I know better and I know how to do better. So today is different than then, I think, because of all the work I did.
And Chuck, you were nodding your head when you lost Mike. Did you immediately enter your thoughts anywhere? Did you record them? Did you write them down at all? Or
No, but as Tamara said, I do recall I had to go in and find Mike when this happened. We were across the hall in another bedroom. And Kathy went out and called 911, and she was on her knees in the living room floor, just sobbing and trying to talk. And having been in that profession before, the fire department, a paramedic, I grabbed the phone from her so that I could talk to him and give him the information and to get him there right away, even though I knew he was dead. I'd seen enough death in my life in the service and in the fire department that I knew he was dead. But then it was just like, for me, I kind of locked it all in and would be a strong person for a while. But then Kathy and I would be at counseling sessions or at meetings with SOS. We'd be coming back home, and I'd be driving, and I have to pull off the road because all of a sudden I just lost it. I would just be sobbing, as Tamara said. I'd just be totally uncontrolled, crying and wondering why, and all the answers and questions and stuff that go through your head. And so, Kathy could get some of it down, and that is a very common, it's not very common, but it is common from counselors, say to write your thoughts down, get it out on paper so it's just not all locked up in your head. And do that, and that's very good. I mean, the book is wonderful that she wrote.
It really is. And so let's pick it up from here. So really you're, and again, we cannot thank Chuck and Tamara for sharing these thoughts, because we can only imagine how difficult that must be. Michael, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, the other thing that's going through my head here, though, too, is to listen to how men and women express it differently. Okay, so you're saying, okay, Tamara has the opportunity to write it down and get it out, but Tamara is engaged with her family all of the time, and that's one of the things us guys don't perceive in terms of the way women work when they're raising a family, because they're in the moment with their child, and then they're in this next moment where they have to do something else, and in this next moment that they have to do something else. We get to go to work, we get to go into these other activities and not be as closely connected with our family emotionally, and with the ability and the need to communicate with them clearly. And so there's two different ways, in some sense, of handling this. And at the same time, part of the key message is, I feel something inside, I need to express that. It's not helpful to hold it in. And then the key thing in both of these situations is they're not only talking about themselves, but they're also responding to the people around them. So Tamara is grabbing Allie and holding on to her. And notice what she was saying there. She's holding on to her and listening. So what's going on? So this not is problems, yada, yada, yada. And the other thing she does as a mother, though, is to recognize the connection of the grief, the inability to express it as a 9-year-old, and ask a simple question. Would it be that difficult if before Demetrius died? And then, as she noted, then she melts into her arms, and you have that connection again. And here, as Chuck is responding, I mean, he sees the trauma there, and at the same time, he responds to his wife then does the functional piece in terms of picking up the phone to get the job done as he's trained to do it, and then goes back in terms of responding. But they're kind of two different ways, and I think it's really important or very helpful for us guys to begin to attempt to look at the way women interact, the way they communicate, and begin to perceive it differently than we do. I cannot imagine having to multitask the way women who are raising kids have to multitask today. It would drive me absolutely crazy, and I think it would drive a lot of other guys crazy too. So for me, there's two different patterns here, and it's helpful to be aware of it. It's helpful to be aware of the need to express it, and also recognize you may not, particularly us guys, may not recognize how a woman needs to express herself, particularly when it comes to an emotional matter.
And women are more emotional in general, I think, and men tend to be fixers. They want to fix the problem and not express it. And we talked about that before. Little boy and little girl fall down. They both skin their knees. What do? We pick the little girl up, cuddle her, and it's okay to cry, honey. And the little boy would pick up and slap him on the hind end and say, suck it up and get back to it. So he's taught not to express or show their emotions, where the females more are. I think we're getting better as a society to say everybody can express their emotions more than we have in the past.
And as much as I agree with that, I would say that the part I agree with is how we express it. In part, because I recall how you were reflecting how you felt after we did that session with Larry. And so, I mean, you're a guy, you focus on what you got to do, and then you get someplace else, you have this kind of funky feeling. You don't really know why you have this funky feeling. You still do the stuff that you have to do. And then if you're around people that are close to you, they might say, look, you kind of look a little funky, and you're not knowing why, what do you mean, I'm just kind of, this is the way life is. And then being able to make that connection that we experience those emotions and that we may not experience them as intensely. At the same time, they're very intense, and I cannot imagine what that's like, whether you are papa or mama, to come in and see your child dead. I mean, that just moves you. It doesn't make a difference if you're a man or a woman. It's going to move you. But part of the key piece is what we want to do is find a way to express that movement, that emotion, in a way that's healthy and doesn't simply shut it down, and continue to do what we're doing here, which is to stimulate the conversation so that others know more effectively how to deal with this.
I had the opportunity to speak to a Rotary Club early on after my book had come out. And there were 60, 70 men, older men, in this room asking me questions about the book, and I was sharing with them about writing it and the contents and all of that. And in sharing my story, I looked around the room, and I had to say, I think men of your generation have been sold short, in that we are allowed, as we've just said here, women are allowed and encouraged to share their emotions. That doesn't mean that you men don't have these emotions too. You just have been pressured to do something differently with them. I would love to do several more shows, or an ongoing, from time to time about this particular topic, because the guys are feeling it. You felt it.
Yes.
Mike's absolutely right. You can't experience what you've experienced without being completely changed for the rest of your life. That's just, there's no getting around that. And yet you're channeled into being a functional person and taking care of and supporting your wife in her emotions and her grieving and her loss, and you stand. How do you do it? And every guy in that room, every man, had wet eyes. They were streaming crying. I had men come up to me afterwards and say, my God, my sister died when I was 18, and I wasn't allowed to cry about it. I couldn't do anything with it. I couldn't put it anywhere because there was no model, no example for them as to how to do that. It's huge.
Now, I have to ask you, well, how did you know when Allie was crying there that you knew that it was tied in with Demetrius, that you knew to ask her
because
that point
it wasn't
question?
like her. It wasn't like her. She's a fix-it person. She's a get-it-done person, and she was feeling consumed by these feelings and didn't know where to put them. So let me also add, yes, I did go off into my closet, my corner, my wherever, to do my writing and to do my really serious grief work. But I I wanted to be a good example to my kids. I knew that this was going to be a very long road for them and for me, and wanted to be a good example. And so we cried a lot. He came up in the conversation whenever the feeling was there, whenever anyone had something they wanted to express. We were an open book. It was allowed. We stopped what we were doing and talked about him, or about the remembrance, or about the feeling that we got to do something with. What can I do with this? Or what is this? So, and it worked.
She also has a very inviting way, the way she does that, right? What does she say? She didn't say, hey, get over it, or that sort of thing.
Right.
I know you want to cry. She said, you've been sold short. You've been sold short. And that's so accurate, that men have been sold short as we buy into the need to suck it up and not express ourselves, because we do have those feelings, those impulses. And so she's honoring that by letting us understand that, yeah, you're sold short, and it's helpful to express it.
Okay, here's the irony in this. I believe that Demetrius was grieving heavily.
Yes.
In the last year of his life, he changed very much. A very dear friend of his went on spring break to San Diego and was murdered while she was there.
Oh, boy.
And this was a girl that had been so kind to him, and he had been in plays with her, and she was very talented, just a really remarkable young woman. And he was devastated by this, and I didn't know how to identify it. I didn't know when I walked by him and he's, I didn't know. I didn't know how to even recognize what was happening, or that he should be having feelings about this. I didn't know how to even think about it, or to give him language, or to encourage him to share what he's feeling. All he had was the male model of, get on with it. Pick yourself up, brush yourself off, and move on. Not a big deal.
Wow. Well, once again, the website is tamarasutton.com, because that's our little secret code that when it's time to move on to the next segment, we went along on that. So we're going to take a break, and we'll come back. We're visiting with Tamara Sutton, author of Demetrius, My Gift of Life. And again, you can go to tamarasutton.com and get more information. But we'll be right back here on the Suicide Prevention Show here on 1360 WLBK.
What if your bad day is more than just a bad day?
What if your bad day stretches into weeks and then months?
What if your bad days disrupt your life, cost you a career, isolate you from friends and family, keep you from living the life you were meant to live?
What if there is hope?
The National Alliance on Mental Illness brings hope to thousands of individuals and families living with mental illness.
NAMI offers education, support, and advocacy that can turn bad days into better days.
Call NAMI DePage at 630-752-0066. That's 630-752-0066.
Or visit us at www.namidupage.org. That's www.namidupage.org. Reaching out, changing lives.
NAMI of DePage.
The WLBK Suicide Prevention Show recently won the Silver Dome Award as the best public affairs radio program in Illinois.
Some of the extraordinary people we've talked to. First one that comes to mind is Denny Miller, a delightful guest, and really gave us an insight as to what it's like to be a coroner and have to deal with the prospect of somebody committing suicide.
We had the police chief on who spoke about how really difficult that is to investigate suicide, and telling the families about what that's like. It's really far-reaching. Friends and family, neighbors are all so much more deeply affected than most of us realize if we haven't been touched by it ourselves.
I was under the old myth that if you talk to somebody about suicide, if you actually use the word suicide, that would prompt that person to commit suicide. And Chuck, we've learned that's not true.
It's very not true. The more you talk about it, less stigma there is, the more comfortable the person that's having those thoughts. They feel a little more free to talk about it, open up, and hopefully not complete that act.
Join us Sunday morning at 9:30 for the Suicide Prevention Show on the station that cares about its community, 1360 WLBK.
Welcome back to the Suicide Prevention Show here on 1360 WLBK, visiting with Citizen Mike, Chuck Seabrass, and a special in-house appearance from Tamara Sutton, author of the book Demetrius, My Gift of Life. And, we talk about this. We've been doing the show for a while now, and we tend to get off. Our original subject matter was finding out why you wrote the book, but really it's about emotion. Mike, say what you just said in the break. We were talking about things. And
I don't know if I remember what I said in the break.
But you said stick with the emotion.
Oh, yeah, stick with the emotion here. And in part, I think that's a very helpful thing, because in listening to Tamara talk about her story and talk about how she became compelled to speak up and how she was talking about she observed Demetrius for an entire year, not understanding what the grief response was about. And so one of the pictures that comes into my mind is that when she got to the point that she was confronted with Demetrius' death and that she could no longer remain silent, of that impulse in her to talk and give some expression to what is going on here. I recognize that there's an emotional response. I recognize I do not know what I to do in terms of to respond to this, but I'm a mother, and by God, I'm going to respond. I don't care what it takes. And so she broke out of that, and then she began to express herself, and she also encouraged her children to express herself as well. And I'm not saying that is exactly how Tamara experienced it. I'm simply saying that as she tells her story, that's one of the pieces that I perceive, and it's a very important message for us in terms of speaking up instead of remaining silent.
And that's your ongoing theme, is to speak up and don't remain silent. And Tamara, you're echoing those sentiments as well.
Absolutely. I love when you say that, Mike. Honestly, every week, my heart just opens up when you say that, because it's so true, and it doesn't matter what the feature, what the emotion, what it is that's going on, whether it's abuse or something that you've seen or something that you've heard or something that you dreamt or something that, whatever it is, it's all significant, it's all important, and you may be the only one that sees it, and you have to speak up and say it. Say the words.
For me, I'm thankful that you have given us a model of life to observe, because that's what you do. So maybe I'm putting the words on it, but I'm just describing what you said that you've been doing. You're speaking up. You're not holding it in. These are gut-wrenching experiences, and instead of remaining silent, sucking it up and being quiet, you find a way to reach out and connect with somebody else that you love and care for.
Thank you.
Fabulous model.
You.
Well, Chuck and Tamara both, because it would be so easy for both of you to just say, all right, I'm going to attempt to forget about this. We will not speak of this again.
Absolutely.
And try to
do.
And most people do that.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're essentially trained to do. Yeah. Well, don't think about it again. We had the guest on, Janice from the Suicide Prevention of the National Foundation, where she was told as a young lady when her cousin committed suicide, don't talk about this. We're not talking about this.
And I'm also glad that you're highlighting how Chuck has done the same thing, that the expressions are, to some extent, they're outwardly different, but inwardly they're similar. So what Chuck did is pick up the same badge of courage to no longer remain silent and to begin to speak to other people. He spoke to you about it. He's participated with suicide prevention services. He's speaking out there. He comes on the radio show to speak out about it. And that's what he does. So he expresses it in that way. They're very similar. They're expressed differently, in part because of male and female roles and yada, yada, yada.
And the thing you brought up, Chuck, with the normal, there'll never be a normal again. There's a new normal,
right?
Is what you're dealing with.
A new normal in your life. I mean, it just, and Tamara knows, it turns your world upside down. I would give everything to go back to the day before that and change it. And so we do have to find a new normal, and that's hard to find. I can say that by doing this, by speaking out, or as Tamara does, writing, there's a lot of people who I knew for a lot of years prior to this happening. I never knew there was a suicide in their family or in their life, but they've come up to me since that, said, thanks for what you're doing. It's made it easier for me, and I can talk about that now, finally.
And that's the amazing thing I'm finding. The more people I talk to, I mean, 33,000 a year that are recorded as suicides. And you mention it to people, and they'll quietly say, oh, you know what? I did lose a brother. I lost a cousin. I lost my aunt. And it's everybody can relate to the emotions when it comes to suicide, but yet nobody wants to talk about it.
That's why I'm glad we're having these conversations here, because I think part of what we're seeing happen is that by these people being courageous enough to get out of their comfort zone to speak to other people, then it allows other people to get out of their comfort zone, to let their guards down a little bit more and reveal where they're really coming from instead of what they think they're supposed to be doing. And that's one of the things I hope that happens with our listening audience, that you experience the genuineness of people that come on this particular show and talk about their journey and be able to get that message that you can live life fully if you can reach down and allow yourself to be expressing yourself instead of remaining silent about those things that are so very important to you.
And Tamara, not only did you capture your feelings in the book, Demetrius, My Gift of Life, but you've been very instrumental now in a grief counseling center there in Michigan. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would, please.
It's actually an organization that's been in place for 14 years. And I was a facilitator, chaired several committees, did fundraising for them. It's a wonderful, wonderful organization and model for a grieving center for children. Families can come. An adult cannot come without a child. That's the difference. So it really is specifically for children, and they can bring their parents with them.
Oh, I didn't realize it was just for children.
It's just for children. So it really engages the entire family. It's set up so that it is age appropriate. There are 2 to 3 years grouped together, so they're pretty much in the same arena at the similar behaviors, thoughts, and concerns, and it goes all the way up from 3-year-olds all the way up through young adults. Which is wonderful because Lex was 21 years old when Demetrius died, and he wasn't going to talk to his friends because they were clueless. He wasn't going to talk to me. I'm too close. It may make me more sad. May be worse on a bad day, worse on a good day, and so he was not going to talk to me. And so he started going to Ellie's place and found a great deal of support and consolation there. It was really wonderful for him. Is it
essentially like a group rap session? Because Chuck, I know you've explained to us the SOS group, the Survivors of Suicide, where you at times will get together in a large group and people will just speak up about their loss.
Yeah, and what we do at that group meeting, it's once a month, and there may be 20 people there may be 50 people there, and so we sit in a circle on our chairs. We go around and I'll say, hi, my name's Chuck Seabrass. I lost my son Mike to suicide March 25th, 2001 to a gunshot wound to the head. That helps you get it out there. You got to say that sometime. You got to face it, and that helps. So we go around the room and we say that, and then if it's coming up to, say, Thanksgiving, then we say somebody who's new in the group doesn't know how they're going to face Thanksgiving without their loved one for the first time. And so we'll say, well, here's how I did it. The next person can say, here's what I did to get through that. Or, and it's just a self-help. You think you're all alone in the world with this, but in fact, there's a lot of people out there with it, and they've walked the path before you. And so they're there to help you, and that's part of my calling now, I guess I'll say, is to help the person that's coming on the path behind me, to help them along in their journey.
I think that's so important because from my perspective, a lot of times we don't do because we don't know how. We didn't see our parents do it. We didn't see other people do it. But in both of these situations with the Grief Center and Suicide Prevention Services, you have the opportunity to walk behind someone who has walked before you. And not only that, to walk beside somebody who has done it in a way where they're healthy, they've had a chance to heal, they are on a path of recovery that regains the life that you lost from the loss of a loved one.
There's another piece, too, and I worked with, as I was telling you earlier, I had 18 3 to 6-year-olds in my group without language because no one talked to them. Children grieve entirely differently than adults do. I get casseroles and cards and maybe a phone call or two over time. Children are really left to themselves, to the side because people don't know if they get what's going on. Or they don't get what's going on, and they don't have the language even themselves to go to the level or the place of the child to say, I'm so sorry about your loss, or to support in some way, or you want to go outside and play basketball, or whatever it is that would really be helpful to this child. So what happens is the kids are left to the side. What I found in my group of these little kids was that we would tell our story. We would, as you do, Chuck, at your group with adults, we did that also. And they would share who it was that had died in their family. What I found remarkable was that a child whose mother had died of cancer could see another child whose mother had also died of cancer. And the recognition that, oh my God, I'm not the only one. Yeah. Somebody else gets it. It was huge. It was huge for their healing because then they can begin again. Then they're not alone. They go to school and they've got a classroom of 35 kids in their class, and they're clueless. Nobody gets it. They feel so isolated. So in this case, they are not isolated, and they learn language from each other.
I'm sorry, we're out of time, and Tamara, I just want to convey to you our gratitude for you coming on the show and the fact that we all got a chance to actually get together here. But Chuck, you and Tamara, just the courage that both of you have to share your emotions and feelings with us, it's deeply appreciated.
Thank you. It is a joy to be here and to meet all of you and the faces in person. I can't even tell you. It's great fun. And I look forward to a continuation here of this work.
I love it. Chuck and Mike, again, thank you both.
Thank you, Terry, and thanks to WLBK for allowing us this time always for what you do for us. This is real groundbreaking.
And that's the Suicide Prevention Show for this week.